Hello, everybody. Hello, welcome. It's time to take another first look at a role-playing game. Yes, that's right, a role-playing game. So today we're going to take a look at Shadowrun 6th World. Now, I know a lot of people are really excited about checking this game out. I also am excited about that. Shadowrun is a game with a long and storied history, right? It came out in, depending on who you ask or where you got it from, 1989, 1990, 1991, you know, in that period of the early 90s, and it came out, and when Shadowrun emerged into the universe, I think a lot of people were very confused and kind of excited, and it represented a very strange merging of fantasy and cyberpunk, right? Like, it had elements of cyberpunk. Obviously, it had cool guns, and it had cybernetics, and it had hacking, and it had corporate espionage. And then it also had trolls and elves and dwarves and what have you. So it was a game that I think that really kind of merged a couple of things that people were already interested in. And if you had told me about this, if I'm sure that if I had been at Gen Con in 1990 and someone had said, Adam, check out this Shadowrun game, I would have been like, what? This just sounds like another Rifts or Torg, right? This sounds very kitchen sink and weird. And I probably would not have been that into it, but because it had been around a little while, and you know, I played Shadowrun for the first time probably not until like 1996 or 1997. And so there were a bunch of books that had been on the shelf at my local game store for almost as long as I had been playing role-playing games. So I was like, okay, I recognize this. This is a thing that I've seen before. I'm curious about this. And for me, my experience with Shadowrun has been predominantly 2nd and 3rd edition Shadowrun when I was a kid. 1st edition Shadowrun during a little show you might have heard of called Mirror Shades. So we did a hacked version of 1st edition. And then Shadowrun 4th and Shadowrun 5th, I kind of just skipped altogether. I've read both of them, but hadn't played them. And I think that's because, and this is where we start to get into Shadowrun's kind of mechanically storied history. So Shadowrun is a property that, as far as I know, has been passed around between multiple different publishers, right? It was created by a company called FASA, who's also responsible for BattleTech. And it was passed around a little bit. FASA I don't think they own any part of it anymore. Catalyst Game Labs now owns and publishes it. And there's a bit of a storied history there in terms of who owns it. There has been several good Shadowrun video games, and then one very strange Shadowrun first-person shooter. Anybody ever play that? You ever play the Xbox Shadowrun? I guess it was Xbox and PC. It had cross-platform play. And it was a very weird shooter. Yeah, online only, like what, 4v4? It was very strange. And so that was there was that. There was a Super Nintendo game. There was a Sega Genesis game. Shadowrun is a very popular world in which to set games, but generally I think you have, if you're looking at modern Shadowrun fans, you pretty much have two types of fan. You have people who say, I love the world of Shadowrun. The mechanisms of the game are a little bit complicated and strange, but I've gotten over it for the sake of my love for the setting. Or you have people who say, I love the setting of Shadowrun. Why are the mechanics this way? Why are they like this? And I feel like you don't have anybody who is like, I just love the systems of Shadowrun, but I don't like the world. Now, Shadowrun's world, I think, is like a lot of 90s role-playing games. It's very strong, very interesting. There's a lot going on there. It has grown and changed pretty dramatically over time. It was an interesting game in that, and you can tell just by the logo, which is just about the only thing about Shadowrun's graphics presentation that hasn't changed. It has, to some degree or another, over the course of its games, it has had the influence of the indigenous people of the area in which the game is set, in terms of they are a part of the game's setting. It is probably the most reference to any group or groups of indigenous American people in any role-playing game that isn't specifically about that topic. And it has been varyingly good or not so good at handling those topics. There are some parts of the Shadowrun material that handles indigenous people and their lives in the 6th World well, and there have been missteps along the way. But as far as I know, it's the most successful mainstream game to include that kind of stuff in its narrative, which is interesting. I remember being drawn to it because I could be an elf with a sniper rifle. And I think that's about as far as many people go. But some of the core conceits of the Shadowrun universe are that the world operates on magical cycles. The game is connected to Earth Dawn, which is the fantasy version. There are characters that are the same in both, but the game's universe, which is our universe, though obviously we don't have elves and stuff, undergoes cycles where magic rises and falls over time. And what we look at in Shadowrun is the future of our world, but magic has returned. And with it, magical species and what have you. And so as a result, man or machine, right? Magic or metal, that's sort of the polar opposites in the world of Shadowrun, that as you become more cybernetic, as you become more of a robo-man, you lose your connection to the natural world, which is like, I don't know. It feels to me like it might have been an interesting tension earlier on, but it's become kind of less and less so as time goes on. We've moved on a little bit, and I think that Shadowrun has made some attempts, and I don't know if this is the thing. Can you remain cyberpunk? And this is, again, the ultimate futile question of this genre that I will be asking myself all the way through and probably forever. Is Shadowrun cyberpunk? It begs the question of what cyberpunk is. Is cyberpunk intimately connected to a mid to late 80s idea of the future, and any deviation from that idea becomes less and less cyberpunk? Or is cyberpunk more what we imagine it to be in a modern context, where it is really sci-fi dystopia with body modification and then whatever else is going on, right? And for me, the ultimate sort of question, without digging too much into like what is cyberpunk, though it's a thought that's on a lot of people's minds as the result of a very popular video game yet to be released of the same name. What does it mean to call oneself cyberpunk? Is it merely establishing an aesthetic? Is it about the core themes of the game? In Shadowrun, the basic premise, though certainly not the only premise, especially decades into the game's existence, the core premise of the game is that you play what are called Shadowrunners. You're the eponymous characters of the game. Your job is that you have no job. You are the sinless. You have no place in the corporate structures of the world. You are set apart from the universe. And to survive, you have to take on jobs from your mysterious benefactor, Mr. Johnson, who works for corporations and organizations within the world. So you take on jobs for corporations in secret against other corporations, in the idea that you are attempting to survive in a world that has no place for you. So it's an interesting premise. It very clearly lays out what the characters do. You fight corps, you break into places, you kidnap people, you blow stuff up, etc., etc. But there are other ways to play Shadowrun. Obviously, source material has created, because this is the thing, when you talk about Shadowrun, people say, no, you can do these other things, which is true. You could work for Dockwagon, right? You could be combat paramedics. You could be members of Lone Star. It could be cyber cops, right? If that's the game you want to play. But the core subject of the game is you are outsiders attempting to get up on the world, right? And this is the 6th edition of that game. Now, when it was conceived back in the late 80s, Shadowrun was very much a part of its milieu, right? It had cutting edge technology at the time, which was like portable computers, like keyboard sized computers. It had cybernetics, right? Cybernetic eyes, arms, organs, bones that could make you stronger or faster, better than human, right? But as time has gone on, Shadowrun has become less and less tied to the 80s idea. It has advanced with our idea of the future, which is what makes me think that I would rather call Shadowrun sci-fi fantasy than fantasy cyberpunk when it really comes down to it, because 4th edition didn't introduce, but really leaned into things like biotech, Wi-Fi, personal networks became a thing. The technology of the universe of Shadowrun has advanced as well, right? So now we have augmented reality. We have ideas about what the future might look like coming from 2000 2018, because that's when this game was developed, 2018 and 19, looking forward, rather than looking back at 1989, looking forward to 2020, right? So we're living in the setting of William Gibson's early works. Side note, never attempt to get William Gibson to sign a copy of Shadowrun. Thankfully, I knew this and would not do it myself. William Gibson does not like Shadowrun. He has gone on record many times. He is not a fan. And I can see why. Because I don't think this is Gibsonian cyberpunk. I think that Shadowrun has a lot more to do. Like if you tell somebody Shadowrun is Neuromancer mixed with D&D, you're doing a disservice to all of those things. I think what really Shadowrun is Dungeons and Dragons meets Snow Crash. Much, much more that, especially now, right? So let's take a look. Let's take a look at Shadowrun Sixth World. So one thing, and we've talked about this, one thing that has never changed about Shadowrun is that logo. It's a little pinker. It's a little glitchier than we've seen it in the past, but that I think it's meant to be like Haida or Salish art representing a dragon. It's the S in Shadowrun, and that has always been the same. But note, not only is this Shadowrun, it's 6th edition, but it's Sixth World, which is the name of the world it's set in. But they've changed the logo, right? The logo is different than we've seen before. And this happens, right? Shadowrun, I think 5th edition, the logo was red and kind of scratchy, and it's been that way. Kind of, they changed the text a little bit. The original logo had a goat skull on the front of it, but the S was still that Coast Salish kind of dragon or sea serpent. So this is the core book for Shadowrun Sixth World. There are 2 supplements that came out, which we won't be taking a look at today. As I mentioned before, it's by Catalyst Game Lab, and this is our cover art. So if you had to guess what this game was about, or what you as a player character would do in this game based on this art, what would you think this game was about? Like they're fighting or preparing to fight someone. We can't really see their opponents. There is an elf with a katana, and then they're shooting a fire dragon out of their hand. These guys seem to be surrounded by foes. The big troll has some kind of goggles. He's dual wielding what look like Panther autocannons, which I'm not sure you can actually do, but whatever, we'll find out in the rules. I think that it's. So this reminds me, this art reminds me, and I think that this is sort of a personal callback, but this art reminds me a lot of the cover art that we used on Dungeon World's Red Book. It was some heroes posing. There was some off-screen danger, and the criticism that we got from some people that I trust and believe in, and looking back at, I think like it's definitely right. There's nothing going on here, right? We don't get to see any action. We don't really, it's characters preparing to do something, but there's nothing in place. If you've watched some of the earlier first looks that we did, like for example, the spy game, in the spy game, things are occurring in that art. I don't think that a cover is the be all and end all of a game, but it's the first thing that we look at. You'll notice throughout this book, the color scheme of this edition appears to be that like light blue magenta mix that we have in the title font there. And you know what? I don't think that's bad. I think it's nice to see them change it up. Shadowrun. When I think of Shadowrun, I think of 3rd edition, which was mostly brown and like bright green. So it's cool to see them mix that up and change the way the game looks. Now, I will say this before we dig too deeply in. I am not going to be as intimately aware of the rules of 5e or 4e. I know a lot of people are interested in seeing if Shadowrun is more or less complicated than it has been in the past. You will have to draw your own conclusions based on your own experience of the game, but this is where we start. We got an elf on the front, we got a troll, we got guns, we got magic, we got neon, and that's something. That's a place to start. So let's see what else we got. So the game itself is, let's see, how many pages is this core book? 311 pages long, right? So it's 311 pages, and it is broken down into sections. such as the life you have left, game concepts, character creation, combat, magic, archetypes, wildlife, rigging, the matrix, running the game, which is the part I'm maybe the most interested in, and then gear. And there are several pages of gear, which, again, if you're interested in Shadowrun, that's to be expected, of course. So the thing that's interesting about a game like this is that there are years and years of stuff to either include or not include. And if you publish a 6th edition of a game, you have to make the choice, like, does the core rulebook contain rules for adepts, right? Are adepts a basic thing? They were added on in 2nd edition. They weren't part of the core, but are they now a core part of the game, right? What about technomancy? Is that a core part of the game or is it not? What do you include? And I think that Vampire went through this exact thing before. What disciplines do you include in your new version? What clans, etc., right? So you have to make that choice. Now, of course, because the world of Shadowrun is so detailed and different from our own, the very first thing that they're going to need to do is introduce us to it. Now, it looks like this is the basic art style of the game, right? This is the kind of art we're going to get throughout. This kind of digital watercolor sort of look, very glowy, very neon, a little scratchy. I'm not sure who the artist is, but this gives us our first look at the, I'm going to say with sarcastic quotes, the Asian influence of the art, in that we have the dragon on the back of this elf's jacket. It looks like they're about to blow this building up. That's my impression. I don't know anything about this building, but it looks like it's being blown up. That's an explosion up there. So yeah, you ride motorcycles, you have big guns, you can be an elf, you have a dragon on your jacket, and you blow things up with bombs. So I will say this about Shadowrun. There's no introductory fiction. Thank you for that. Thanks for telling me things that I need to know about the game instead of giving me 10 pages of in-character stuff. So that's cool. The designers have given us a little bit of information about what to expect, right? So let's see what they think about their own game. Shadowrun endures because it takes everything cool about genre role-playing and throws it in your face. Want to face scheming villains, fierce monsters, fire-breathing dragons? They're all out there, but the villains throw fireballs with one hand and shoot exploding ammo with the other. The monsters guard a top-secret corporate research compound, and the dragon, she owns the compound. The chance to face all these dangers and try to survive the dystopian 6th world is what Shadowrunning is all about. A new edition is an opportunity for both refinement and experimentation. So what did we bring to this version? The core goals are simple. Put the classic man, magic, and machine elements of Shadowrun in a more streamlined package, making the rules move faster while still giving the players lots of choices and tactics. This Shadowrun book is shorter than the past few editions, but it still has space for plenty of options. Shadowrun Anarchy exists for players who want a fast-moving, more narrative game, and it will continue to be supported. So Shadowrun 6th World fills the space that is more detailed. You'll roll the dice more often in this edition than in Anarchy, and have more options to push the odds in your favor. There are also more choices of all kinds: gear, spells, augmentations, etc. We hope players will find lots to do and be able to get into it quickly. So Shadowrun Anarchy, we did a first look at this, 2 years ago after Gen Con, and it felt to me like an introductory version of Shadowrun 5th edition, which is weird because Anarchy is going to continue to be published, but the expectation, it seems, is that you play Anarchy first to learn about Shadowrun, and then it moves you into this game. I would not suggest playing Shadowrun Anarchy. It did not do anything for me. It feels like it's trying to be a story game version of Shadowrun, but falls quite short. I think if you're going to get into Shadowrun, you might as well accept that the world and the mechanics are the way they are and just play the core game, or dig into a fan edit like the PBTA version, 6th World, which is going to be very confusing now, given that that's the name of this edition. So it sounds to me like their plan is to make some experimental changes to the game, try to streamline it. Sounds like that's what people want from Shadowrun, right? A game that doesn't take 17 years to make a character. And I think the question will be, do they succeed? Is that something that they have done in this thing? They set out their goal, and then we're gonna go and see if they manage it. So veteran players might want to skip to the game concepts chapter, but here's some of the basic stuff that has changed. Now this is gonna mean a lot to me, but it might mean something to you if you've played this before. So the core stuff that is different: gaining and spending edge happens more frequently. I've heard that edge is like a deeper part of this game. The weapon stats are simplified. There is an abstract stat called attack rating now. Skills are simplified. Armor is not rolled as part of the damage resistance test. Eliminated limits. So limits are removed. Simplified action structure with minor and major actions. Simpler initiative. Spells don't use force. And matrix attributes have changed. So those are things that are different if you're coming at this from 5th edition Shadowrun. Those seem to be the core stuff. And then unusually we're presented with shadow slang, I guess, so that we can understand the NPCs in the stories we are about to read. So here's 2 pages, and here's our text. Here's our story. So it gives us some information about the world by way of its lingo, and then we get that introductory story. I will say I do like that there's a box full of NERPs right here. That makes me happy. There is a what is this? A Maria Mercurial poster. There's a Vote Dunkelzahn, which I guess is a retro poster, and then we've got this Harlequin clock up here. And all of that is kind of cute, but I'm not really sure what is going on with this orc right now. So we get Foursquare, which is a story that I am not going to read. We get some more art that gives us like a little bit more kind of what to expect from the universe, more trolls. I guess this is a group of Shadowrunners hanging out. Yeah, it's an orc. You can tell because they have tusks. You got the tusks there, and then that's a troll because she got horns. And then maybe she's a dwarf because she's short, or maybe she's just a short human. So this is a time-honored tradition in like 90s RPGs, is in-character stories. And then we get some history of the game. Now, I think that this is actually really important. Like knowing the setting of the game, knowing where our game is going to take place and what kind of things take place in that setting, I think is really important. But it's a very hard thing. Wow, is this Shadowrun Jace Bellerin? It's a really hard thing to impart to your reader, right? If I had to pick a game that does this really well, I would put the gold standard as being something like Blades in the Dark, because Blades, if you're playing core Blades in the Dark, the setting Duskfall is as important to that game as Seattle is to Shadowrun. But it's mechanically important, right? You don't learn about it right away in a whole bunch of stuff. You learn about it through the game itself. So this is a lot, right? If you might bounce off of all of this stuff, but it gives us an idea of what the universe looks like, and we could start to assume maybe where we fit into it as we read this, but it is quite a lot. It's quite a lot to read. So I'm not gonna really dig into it, but essentially it gives us the information about how the Matrix works. It gives us information about how magic returned to the world. It gives us the corporations, which are going to be our enemies and shadowy allies against one another. And if you're a big Shadowrun lore nerd, this part will probably be very exciting for you. I'm going to go back and read it all because I'm interested in seeing how they've advanced the world to this point. And then here we are. Now we're corporate wars, right? So more art to show. It's a lot of information. You can see we're still going through all of this stuff, but again, it's important, and it helps you understand kind of where the world is at. Then we get into the basic, like, what is a role-playing game, right? There are 2 main roles, players and game masters. The players have characters. They go out on adventures. They take on Shadowrun jobs, and they hopefully don't die. The game master helps the story along by setting up the framework, controlling the NPCs, and keeps the story moving, providing incentives and opposition. Now, I think this is really important, right? We can lose these finite details when we look at a role-playing game. When a game says what a player or a game master does, you have to consider that a rule. right? That is the game. The game only has its words and its art to tell us what it's about. So this is the game telling us the game master's job is to keep the story moving, providing incentives and opposition to make the player characters' lives interesting. This is a hidden principle, right? It's buried in a block of text rather than laid out on a bullet point, but this stuff matters. It's not just filler, right? The goal of a role-playing game, according to this edition of Shadowrun, is to use the players, game masters, and dice to tell a story with unexpected twists and drama. So that's what this game is going to be giving us tools to do, right? So this game uses D6s, a whole bunch of them. You're counting up the number of 5s and 6s that you roll. So it's a pool of dice. You roll them. You want to check how many 1s you get. If more than half the dice you rolled are 1s, then it is a glitch or a critical glitch. If you got more hits than you need to success, the hits above the minimum amount are called net hits. Okay. Bunch of D6s. We roll them. 5s and 6s are successes. We're trying to get a target number, like an obstacle. And then above that, we have net hits, which I guess make our success bigger. If we get more 1s, or more than half 1s, then we glitch, which is our critical fumble in this game. So you generally look at a skill and a linked attribute. You add them together, White Wolf style, and then that's your pool. And then we talk about tests. So in this game, this is what a test looks like, a simple test. It's just a skill, an attribute versus a threshold of difficulty. Like pretty bog standard stuff, not too super different from a bunch of other games like this that we have seen before. Yeah. I like dice pools. I like rolling buckets of dice. I like the finite, like the little finicky adjustments that you can do to it. Yeah, I don't mind this as a system. I think that it's a reasonable way to set up this stuff. Opposed tests are just trying to get the most successes. Extended tests are a certain number over a period of time. This is all pretty normal stuff. Nothing new or exciting here. Now, this is interesting. The game you have this option to take 20. So sometimes the player doesn't want to trust the dice. You feel you have a large enough pool, you can buy hits. So 1 hit for every 4 dice. It's all or nothing. You either buy it or you don't. So if you want to succeed on a difficulty 3 and you have 12 dice, you can just succeed. But, and this is the thing that seems weird to me. I guess this is classic, like this kind of thing. We'll get to you in a second. It shouldn't happen in a circumstance where a glitch or critical glitch would have a significant impact on the test's outcome. Now notice we're looking at and maybe this will come in the GM section, but we're looking at the dice and it doesn't really tell us when to roll the dice. I guess it's at some point you attempt something that either other people, the laws of the universe, or both do not want you to accomplish. That's not super clear to me, but this isn't like a to do it, or roll dice or say yes type situation. And again, maybe that's in the GM section. You are allowed to try again, but every time you retry the same thing, you're at -2 dice. So it looks like that's the penalty system, is it removes dice from your pool. I don't know who this person is, but we're reinforcing the gun, sword, cybernetics part of the equation. She's got some cool airbrush tattoos. She's standing in blood. I don't know what's going on. So we'll look at the character sheet at the end. We don't need to go through all of the different attributes, but we will take a look. It looks like edge is an attribute, guts, risk, and heedless ignorance of danger. So edge is a stat. It's a special attribute. Magic is an attribute if you are awakened, if you have magic. And then resonance. So here we go. There's that answer about technomancers. Interacting with the matrix through the power of your mind. Net psychics. So resonance is in this. And you can be a technomancer ostensibly, unless it's setting you up here to know what it is, but then putting them in a supplement. And then essence. So essence is that thing I was talking about before, where it goes down the more cybernetics or trauma that you undertake. And then as essence goes down, it pulls magic with it. So you can't have a ton of cybernetics and magic unless you are one of a few very rule-breaking kinds of creatures within this world. So we have our physical condition modifier and all that stuff. It's interesting that we're given initiative here during the like understanding your stats. Is initiative it is a stat. Okay, it's a determined stat. Your initiative rank and your initiative dice. Okay, cool. Sure. Attack rating for weapons, qualities, gear, and then contact. So in Shadowrun, part of it is that you are not alone. Your character is connected to other people. Traditionally, you have created these contacts in advance and then acquired them through narrative play. I tend to prefer mechanical like contact. I like circles rolls, but it looks like contact is not necessarily a stat in this game, which is cool. And then we have traits. So it's giving us basically like a lot of out of context mechanical information, which can be useful. Like it's nice to know all this before we go in. Normally, I think a lot of games would have jumped into character creation right now and been like, decide what your logic is. Roll for your intuition without explaining what those things are for. So it is kind of nice. It's a little dry in a game as mechanically complex as Shadowrun. It's quite a lot to absorb at once, right? Like we're talking about combat rounds and player turns and initiative actions on what page is this? Like 40? I feel like this is maybe a little out of place, but you know, I guess knowing these actions and having all of the rules references in one place is kind of what they were going for. So that if you're curious about something like what a term means or what actions you can do, it's all kind of jammed up at the front of the book. Though, again, I don't know if I need to know an example of called shots or dropping prone this early on. I feel like I would have probably explained all the base stats and then I would have cut this and pushed it further on in the game. But editing is very challenging. So this gives us all the basic stuff the characters can do. And in a way, I guess, looking at this stuff is mechanically, these are the basic moves of the game, right? These are the basic moves of the game that teach us what is this game about. This is the hack and slash. This is the defy danger. This is the act under fire, right? These are things that characters in the game mechanically do. You're going to change device modes. You're going to command spirits. You're going to hit the dirt. So in that way, I think it does imply or impart to you some information about what kinds of things you are making a character to do. Now, if this list included things like make a diplomatic oeuvre or paint a painting or give a speech, that would be a different game, right? It would impart to us information mechanically that tells us something different about Shadowrun. But so far, Shadowrun appears to be about braka, and also like mind hacking of the internet and casting spells and shit, action shit, which is fine. It highlights what the game thinks is important because it's what is mechanical. And then we get to glitches, which I think look to me to be GM driven. Yeah, rolling a glitch means something went wrong, inconvenient rather than disastrous. Dropping a weapon after you swing with it, briefly forgetting your assumed name after someone's fooled by your disguise. If you're old enough hit, a test with a glitch might also be a success. So I guess glitches are both critical fumbles and how we do like granular success. So if you roll, I just feel like if you're rolling like 6 dice and 4 of them are 1s, the other 2 are a 5 and a 6, it's not going to get complicated that often because you need to have half or more as, yeah. And then a critical glitch is if you fail and it's a glitch. Use critical glitches to advance stories with an air of desperation without pummeling the players into hopelessness. Like it's sort of like Genesis, but not really, because I feel like it comes up much less often. And again, I'm talking from my math brain is very bad. So I don't know how often on 6 dice you're going to come up with 4 1s and 2 successes, but I don't think it's very often. Yeah. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm going to say that glitches come up pretty rarely. And you're more likely to get a critical glitch than a glitch because if you have 4 1s or whatever, you're probably not necessarily going to get a 5 and a 5 or a 5 and a 6 or 2 6s. You'll probably get a 3 or a 4 in there too. Huh. All right. Well, so that's the core dice thing in the game. Piles of D6s. against a target number of certain number of successes. And then, and then that's how that goes. So let's talk about edge. Now, edge is something that I think has changed quite a lot in this version. This is using your character's luck, and much of the game is built around gaining and using the edge that you get. Edge can be tactical advantage, it can be luck, it can be seizing an opportunity. You track it on your character sheet, and it gets added to and subtracted from. And I think they're making little edge tokens. You can only have one expenditure per round, and you can't use multiple types of. Is that how it works? One expenditure, and it can't include multiple booster actions or combination of the two, but the same boost can be multiplied if you wish. Okay, so you can use the same boost more than once. You start a session with edge equal to your edge rank. It can be carried over and accumulated up to 7. Including the edge provided by your base edge attribute. If the edge of your confrontation, your edge points are at the low. Okay, all right. So you garner edge, and then it goes away when you finish. In the session, it can be carried over. Any edge garnered over your base attribute goes away when you complete any ongoing confrontation. Oh, I see. So you can build it up, and then it goes away, and then, okay, all right, sure. So if you had like 5 edge, you start the session with 5. If you get to the end of the session and you have 3, you go up to a maximum of 7. Okay. All right. Sure. So you gain edge through gear, spells, qualities, and other items. Social situations can provide edge. See the social edge table. In addition to the ways to gain edge, you can get it through roleplay. Oh, no. Okay, all right, so there's a bunch of concrete ways to gain edge, or maybe edge is just a short form of advent edge. In addition to the ways to gain edge through game mechanics, you can also gain it through role-playing. If a player does something brilliant, especially funny, or otherwise awesome, if they do, the game master can award them with a bonus point of edge for the quality play they bring to the table. This bonus edge is subject to all the normal limitations of gaining and keeping edge. So yeah, it's pretty much like advantage that you get from stuff, but also you gather it up as you play your character. But it's not even playing your character. It's just do something smart, funny, or awesome. And it does say the game master can award them. So I guess this means that the GM's responsibility is tracking those things, is like managing them. So, all right. Preventing edge abuse can only be gained when it's part of a real opposed counter. Do not reward points of edge that are not directly part of an ongoing confrontation. And they shouldn't reward players who attempt to game the system. A player might aim their weapon at an innocent passerby to stack up on the edge they might gain from targeting such a person, or they might try to get multiple looks at something that isn't a real opponent when they have better vision than them in an effort to stack up extra edge. The easiest part of this guideline is to say edge should not be awarded to any player taking an action solely to gain edge. So they've made a game in which that's possible, but then they tell you don't do it. Because I guess, okay, all right, sure, whatever. I'm not gonna judge it out of play, but it seems a bit odd. Yeah, like you can gain inspiration by killing an innocent bystander, but don't do it because that's not allowed. I guess it means that the GM has to judge whether you are playing right or not. That is a responsibility on the GM, and I hope to God that the GM section has a big chunk about how to give out edge. So you spend edge to reroll dice, boost your initiative, use an edge action. So there are special actions you can only take when you have edge. 2 edge gives you an extra die. You can spend 2 to give 1 to someone else. Negate 1 edge of a foe. Okay, so this is a lot like personally earned story points in Genesis, right? And then use one of the 2 edge actions. 3 edge buys you an automatic hit, heal a box of stun. 4 edge, wow. Okay, so it's expected that you have a lot of edge. 4 edge boosts, add your edge to your dice pool, which is like tapping your nature and mouse guard. Heal physical damage, reroll all your failed dice. This kind of feels like it sort of feels like a combination of Artha and story points from Genesis without the... Oh, I was about to say without the narrative stuff, but here it is. So if you have 5 of your maximum 7, you can create a special effect. Bring your creativity to the table, which you wouldn't have done otherwise. Spend your edge and something fortuitous happens. It's up to you and your game master to determine what it is, but it should turn the tides slightly in your favor. Burst pipes, approaching sirens, incoming dock wagon. That adds a little more oomph to your side or puts a little stress on the enemy. Look at the economy here. So re-rolling all of your failed dice costs 4 edge. Coming up with a minor beneficial narrative effect costs 5. And is reliant on your GM giving you permission. Now, I'm not saying that this is good or bad, right? I'm not saying that this is necessarily like, I don't know the rest of the system yet. I'm not making that call. What I am saying is look at how much it costs and think about what the mechanics of the game are telling us. What are we learning from this, right? So when it says you have to spend 5 edge to create a special effect, it's telling us something about the authority of the game. You really have to save up to be able to say, maybe these pipes running through the basement of this hospital contain liquid nitrogen for freezing biological samples in the lab. And if I shoot one, it'll spray liquid nitrogen all over my enemy. That costs you 5 edge points. And you still have to make use of the thing that you've created. So yeah, just like take a look at that. Now, our edge actions don't cost a major or minor action, but you have to use them in conjunction with one. So you can do multiple attacks, right? This is very awkward. Multiple attacks, range attack. You played this combat like a game of chess, using each strike to direct your opponents to a particular spot. Now they're there and you can attack without even looking at them, since you're firing at a spot, not a person. That's uncomfortable. When performing this multiple attack roll, you'll full dice pool for each target. It's 4 edge. Big speech. So it costs 4 edge, and you basically, it's a social attack, right? Influence plus charisma twice. First time it's a teamwork test for yourself. This seems to be the same. You can spend 2 edge to get 200 new yen from onlookers. So it's a haggling skill. Okay. These are named very strangely. A called shot is 5 edge. A called shot to the vitals is also 5 edge. Firing from cover is 2 edge, which means you can't. Oh, you just fire with, you're negating a pool penalty. Okay. See, I wonder why they didn't just say spend 2 edge to negate a penalty, or spend 2 edge to roll to help yourself, or something, and like broaden those instead of making them specific. Knockout blow. So knocking someone unconscious costs 2 edge. Reducing the called shot penalty is 1 edge. Perform a skill without penalty that you don't have. Yeah, I think there's a ton of, like, edge goes out and comes in very quickly, right? Because at the end of a session, you refresh up to your edge rank, and you get it from a bunch of other stuff. So tracking edge in and out is very important. Okay, cool. That's a lot. This is a lot of information early on. Oh, here we go. That's the table I was looking for. Edge actions by cost. Okay. All right. So edge coming in, edge going out. You get it from circumstances like advantage, and you get it from inspiration from your game master. Not for playing your character, but just for being like funny and cool, I guess. So like playing your GM and knowing what they like. You can burn your edge. You permanently lose a point of it. You can re-earn it with karma. Karma is experience in this game. And then, so you burn it forever to smack down. So get a success with 4 net hits. or do the persona thing where you don't die. Right, not dead yet. This is the will to live. I like that. I like that in games. It works in Burning Wheel. This means that if you like your character, you have a number of lives equal to your edge score. I feel like edge. How do we get edge? Edge is so fucking important. Like that stat. I guess we'll find out in character creation. All right, so we can burn edge. Occasionally there'll be a wild die. Wild die is exploding. On a 6, it blows up and you roll it again. On a 1, it deflates and kills out a success. Cancels all the 5s. That's right. If you get a 1. Yeah. How to get things done. Plenty of approaches to take to the myriad problems of the 6th world. Combat. This is a game about fighting. All the art has showed us this is a game about fighting. That's fine. The game knows what it's about. Combat uses, oh, that's kind of cool. How to get things done is sort of a neat thing. If you want to play a combat character, you never played Shadowrun before, agility for targeting, intuition and reaction for acting quickly and avoiding fire, strength for unarmed, body for damage. Firearms in close combat to attack, athletics to throw and avoid weapons, engineering to fire vehicle weapons, maybe some biotech to stitch up wounds. So that's cool. I like this. This section could probably have come before, but this is the preamble for character creation. Yeah. So, okay. All right. So this is like, if you want to play this kind of character, if you want to do this thing in the world, make a character like this. So if you want to hack the Matrix, here's how you do it. If you want to be a magician, here's the stuff you need. If you want to be a rigger, and if you want to accomplish social stuff. So that's interesting that it lays those things out, right? It says, this is a game about combat, hacking, magic, rigging, and social. Those are the five things in the game. It's what kind of game this is. So it'll talk to us about contacts. A lot of this seems very scattered. Like why is how things get done not, I literally expected to turn the page and be on character creation. This needs to come either before you introduce all the mechanics to us or right before character creation. But these are sort of the pillars of Shadowrun. This is what it's about. But then also, like, we're going to talk about contacts. You can take a status, which I think is a Final Fantasy style status effect. Toxin, chilled, burning. So these are like 5e, right? Status effects in that. I don't know if this is something that was in 4th and 5th edition of Shadowrun. But okay. All right. So status effects are a thing. Blinded 1, 2, and 3. Burning number. Again, Genesis, right? Yeah, you can really see, if you look at this game, you can really see what its influences are. Which isn't a criticism. I think that recognizing influences in a game help you understand what the game is trying to do. So I'm feeling a lot more Genesis in this than maybe I expected. Bits and pieces of like Burning Wheel and Fate and yeah. It would be really interesting to compare and contrast Genesis using Shadow of the Beanstalk to do a cyberpunk game, because honestly, like if somebody sat me down and said, Adam, you have to pick any game system that's out there right now and do a kind of action-oriented cyberpunk game, I would pick Genesis and Shadow of the Beanstalk. I would do it like a Netrunner game. But this is obviously an option. We have the new cyberpunk coming out. The genre is becoming popular again, and people are diving back into it. And it's interesting seeing what each one holds, like what each one is good at. I'm not sure what Shadowrun is good at yet. I guess mixing, they want to be good at mixing fantasy and sci-fi. So we'll see if that's what they accomplish. So, all right, I'm not going to go through all the statuses, but basically you can be lit on fire or turned invisible or nauseated or knocked prone. Sure. So in the core book of Shadowrun, in the core game of Shadowrun, you fit one of the various meta types. So you're a dwarf. You're an elf. Look at that big gun she's got. Oh, look at her sparkly pants. So you're a dwarf, You're an elf. Why does everything have a Latin name? Well, because they were named by scientists. It's in universe. So you're a dwarf. You're an elf. You're a human. You're an orc, and each one gives you what they are known for, a quality, a biological quality that they have, and then an idea of like their height and weight. Because they're all human, right? Fundamentally, they're Homo sapiens, but dwarf, elf, human, and an orc, and then trolls at the end here, I assume. There he is. Trolls. And so you'll pick one of those when you make your character, and it'll give you some bonuses as a result. And then you pick your character's lifestyle, and these are the things that. Now, the thing I never understood about Shadowrun as a concept, if you are a Shadowrunner and you are living a luxury lifestyle, if you can afford 100,000 new yen a month, are you so bad with your money that you have to keep Shadowrunning to be able to pay for it? Like, why are you still a Shadowrunner? You should invest that shit. But I guess that's I don't know. We've talked about this 100 times when Shadowrun has come up. Like, there's no end goal. The goal is, it's the same with D&D. Like, you don't retire from being a Shadowrunner. You don't retire from being an adventurer. That's just the premise of the game. And if you get to a point where you don't need to be a Shadowrunner anymore, you stop playing that character. You're like, I can now afford to live a luxury lifestyle for the rest of my life. I'm out. I'm going to make a new character who's actually a Shadowrunner. But this is the thing. It gives you like your character's lifestyle, and it implies to us that class struggle is a part of the game. Yeah. And what I mean is, like, there's lots of ways to justify it, right? Tons of ways to justify it in the universe, but I'm saying the game gives us no mechanical out. Well, like, a retirement track would be perfect for Shadowrun. Like, when can you give up this life? Because it's a heist. Fundamentally, Shadowrun is a heist game at its core. And that idea of, like, one last job, or I just need to save up another 1,000,000 new yen and then I can get out of here, right? That's a trope. And there's no mechanical stuff in the lifestyles thing to do that, right? Like, the difference between a temporary lifestyle and a permanent lifestyle, and like being able to escape and being able to get out of that life. Like, that's a part of the narrative, and it's not in that. So anyway, character creation. So in this game, we make characters. The steps we follow to make characters is defining our character's role and history, selecting our priorities, qualities, customization, buying gear, finishing steps. So your role and history, figuring out who you want to be. A name and a role are great to know, but where you came from is important too. These elements will help you see how your character approaches different situations and give them their own life. So this is where we're going to see, like, life paths, right? We're going to get like 40 pages of Shadowrunner life paths. All right. So your character is going to need a role they fill as part of a runner team. There are uncountable variations, but we'll look at 4 basic roles: arcane specialist, face, samurai, street samurai, and technology specialist. If one of those resonates, go read that section. If none of them jump out, read them all and look a little deeper. Start with... If one of those resonated with you, go read that section. If none of them jumped out, read all of them and then read a little more. Start with broad strokes and the fine details will come in later. Okay, sure. So the idea in the game is that when you're making your character, you're aiming for arcane specialist, face, street samurai, or technology specialist. Those cover kind of all the basic stuff, right? Arcane specialist might be an adept, a conjurer, or a magician. And then face might be like, you're a face, or you could be a rocker, I guess. Street samurai is all the various types of people who kick ass with swords and guns. And then technology specialist is a hacker or a rigger, basically, in this core bit. So there is a step for putting together your character's past. But it's not mechanical, right? it is still the rules of the game. You are still supposed to think about these things. But it's a quick series of background points. Where were you born? Where were you raised? Where were you trained? Where is your character now? How do you feel about the darker aspects of the world? Why is your chin so big? What do you think about the world? Like, this stuff, like, it's fine, but I would like it if this stuff had some kind of like impact on the character. This is really all just sort of like getting to know the world and stuff that might be important to your character, which I guess is okay if you're playing Shadowrun for the first time. I do think this is interesting. So there is some good bits here. So how does your character feel about the darker aspects of the world? This is a chance to portray someone you're not, push out and play out some of those heroic fantasies, or dive in and create someone deplorable, but be warned, you're playing this game with other people, and there are lines in the real world we just don't cross. Spouting hateful speech about groups of real humans just because it's in character is never right. There are two other caveats to keep in mind. If you decide normal rules of social conduct don't apply to your characters, others may decide to forego those rules as well. The game world might become a very nasty place for you without even your teammates' support. If you're playing a deliberately abrasive character, you need to make sure everyone is on board with what you're doing. Playing characters that ruin the game for others is against the spirit of the game. Good. Yes. Tell everyone that you want to be cybernetic Aragorn. Talk to your players, like your group players, and say, this is what I want to play. How do we feel about that? Is that okay? Is everybody all right with that? Let's not ruin the game for anybody. Also, I still like you as a player. I'm going to play a grumbly jerk, but please, like, make it work at the table. And if it bothers you, like, let me know, right? If you're going to be Macaria, tell everybody at the table your plan and get them on board so that when you play and somebody's character is annoyed with your character, you don't worry that they're annoyed with you, right? This is a thing. If you're going to play Cantor Haig, if you're going to play Dr. Grigori, like, have these conversations. This is good advice for any game. It's nice. It's a rule. It's in the game. You have to do it. When you're playing with a gaming group you know well, sometimes you can explore the darker sides of a character, but that tends to go less well with new groups or groups at conventions. When playing with people you don't know, don't bring the darker baggage into the game with you. It's good advice too. Talk to the people you're playing with. Shadowrun's a dark setting, and some antisocial behavior will happen in the game. It's important to consider specific areas of what you're comfortable with and what the group is comfortable with. I like that this is presented, not only think about this as your character, but think about this as a player and talk to your group. So what do we think about killing people? Murder, no matter where it is illegal. Killing someone in self-defense can lead to legal battles. In Shadowrun, deaths are investigated, right? And it gives you some ideas, like talk about this with your group. Talk about drugs and alcohol, right? We're not talking about casual use. Is it okay for your characters to be like, you know what? We're going to take these BTL chips and we're going to sell them to this like poor community because that's going to make us enough money to buy the guns that we need to go and steal more BTL chips from this corporation. Is that an okay character premise? Are we willing to investigate what awful shit we're going to participate in the world? Do that, right? It isn't just like my character likes weed. It's like, is this going to be a thing in the game? Can we do this as a group? Trafficking. Right? What do we do if we find out that the cargo we're moving for Renraku is human beings? Right? This is a thing that can be in the game. How do we feel about that? Racism and injustice. Talk about this with your group. Talk about it. Shadowrun, if you start a game of Shadowrun without having a racism conversation with your group beforehand, you have dropped a very important plate. It's part of the core setting, right? People are racist towards each other based on metatype in Shadowrun. And as with a lot of fantasy, sometimes that becomes a stand-in for real life racism. There are groups in Shadowrun that are very much analogous to things like the KKK. There are sort of skinheads equivalent, humanist polyfront, like all of that stuff is in the game of Shadowrun. But if you do not talk about it and you just assume that's part of the game and I'm just going to barrel forward, you're doing a disservice to yourself and to your group. Talk about it, right? How do we feel? What are our sensitivities around that stuff? Respect people's boundaries. It says here, right in the rules. You have to do it. So that's nice. It's nice seeing that because it's it's important that Shadowrun is aware that that's what it's about. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, right? Like very, very little serious address of like racism in Mirror Shades, but you could play a game that's very much about that, right? You can make those calls as you talk about this, have this conversation before you make characters, which is good. It's given to us in that order. So we select our character priorities. This is a time-honored tradition of assigning priorities. It's weird. I've only ever seen Shadowrun do this. You basically get A through E and you assign them. And once you use A, that means your other ones are elsewhere. So if you want to have a bunch of attributes, you will not be able to have as much magic. If you want to have a shit ton of money, you might have to pick a lower meta type. It's interesting. I think it's a fast way to make characters. I don't know. I don't hate it. I sort of like it. I think it's a fast way to get you into the game. I don't need character creation to be infinitely flexible. I like character creation that just tells me like, these are your 5 options. Pick one. I'm like actually pretty okay with that. But some people I think are not into it. Some people don't like it. So you're gonna do that. You make your selections, then you basically spend your points. You spend your agility, your attribute points, your skills. You spend your resources on gear, and you make your character. And then at the end of it, you get qualities. And qualities in this game are they're maybe one of the most 90s parts of the design. They cost karma to get good things, and they earn karma to do bad things. And you can kind of get into that GURP situation where you're like, well, I want my character to be really smart, so I guess I only have one arm. We'll take a look at the list, but it's... I don't know. I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it, and it's something that I would like to have seen not in the game so much. I don't think earning points for like bad stuff at this point in the game is this is what I like about Burning Wheel is that all of your traits, good or bad, they don't balance out. They're all good in that they can all earn you Artha. They can all earn you points. So if your character has a terrible temper, that's good because you can play that and you can earn points for it. But in this, having a terrible temper will just mean your character might freak out and you might lose control of them, which is like, it's the whole Daredevil thing. I don't really jibe with it, but so it can earn you karma. You start with 50 karma to just like tweak your character a little bit. And it also teaches you the character advancement section. And then you figure out your character's context. So you get your charisma times 6 to spend on connection and loyalty ratings for your contact. And then that's it. There's a bunch of like attribute stuff. There's combo attributes in this game. Like composure is your willpower and your charisma. Judge intentions is willpower and intuitions. It's like a test you can make. Memory, lift, carry. Like some of these things are skills and some of them aren't. That's just how it is. And then advancement. So I do like when games teach you advancement as part of character creation, where you learn like you spend points. Genesis does this too. You spend some of those points early on, and it teaches you how to spend them as you go. So let's take a look at qualities. Let's take a look at positive and negative qualities. So if you want your character to be these things, it costs you points. If you want to be ambidextrous, if you want to be bland, costs 8 karma. If you want to be cat-like or double-jointed or make a good first impression. I wonder if you can take you can, I guess. If you have 20 karma, you can take first impression and blandness. You get 2 edge for social test during your first meeting, but then they won't remember you afterwards. Which, all right, cool. Man, that guy was great. What was that guy's name? Okay. Gearhead, guts, like pretty standard stuff. A lot of it pulled from earlier versions. Human looking. So you're an orc, a dwarf, or an elf, but you look more human. If you need to hide your meta type, you need to pass for human. So this is a whole thing here, hey? This is the kind of thing you'd want to talk about, I think, with your group, right? To be like, so if I take human looking, and it gives me a benefit to look more human, that implies that looking more human is good. And if you are playing with like people of color or trans people, this is a conversation that might cause some concern at the table. It might be hard to have that conversation, right? Because human looking in this game is not too far off from like pale skinned or passing, right? So, you know, it's in the game. Talk about it, right? With your players. So, yeah, I don't know. Again, it's a good thing they gave us some of that advice, because there is some sensitive stuff there's sensitive stuff in the game, and it implies that it's better to look human because you get a bonus. You would want that. I wonder if there's like a elf or orc version. I know that there have been in previous versions, so let's keep looking. Photographic memory, resistance to pathogens, will to live. Nope, that's it. So it's, you want to look more. I'm not sure what's going on here, but that's okay. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So negative qualities. So these are things that you will gain. You are better at other things if you take these. If your character is addicted to a substance, you'll get more karma to spend on other things. If you have an allergy, same. AR vertigo, combat paralysis. If you have dependence, if you have distinctive style, elf poser. This is kind of similar in that you are trying to look like or be an elf, but you are not. This is negative. It is negative to be an elf poser. But what's interesting is that elf poser is internal for its penalties, right? Take a look at this. So elf poser, maybe you got surgery, maybe you learned Sporethiel, maybe you like pretending to be an elf, but it's not about how other people perceive you. It's that you are more easily influenced by other metatypes. Elves, orcs, and trolls gain a point of edge in influence tests against you. So that's kind of interesting that it's about your own internal elf weebiness rather than about the social stuff. So that's kind of interesting. So what else we got? Impaired, not meant to be naturally talented, incompetent. I really like making characters and then taking a trait called incompetent. In debt, insomnia. Like the thing about these is they seem like interesting to me. Like I would want characters to have these. Like if your character's in debt, that's fun. That's a hook. That's things to do. If your character is like honor bound, that's interesting too. I think it's sort of weird. Like, okay, so honor bound is interesting because it's like some options for codes. Assassin's Creed, Bushido, Code Duello, the pirate code, but then like Khalsa, which is like an actual thing. Like, I'm pretty sure, I mean, it's Shadowrun, so Bushido, like, I'm pretty sure there are lots of people that like do that, but like, it feels weird to me to throw Khalsa in with like Assassin's Creed and like Code Duello. I guess they chose it because it's part of like a warrior tradition. I feel like this would be the kind of thing like honor bound might be interesting if again you talked about it with your group and with your GM and you were like my character is like deeply like Mormon or something. I think that's cool. Like I like that's way more interesting to me if your character's like, I'm a Catholic. And not just like a go to Catholic school kind of Catholic, but I care very, very deeply about it. And it's a huge part of my life. I think that's way more interesting than the Assassin's Creed or like, you know, because it's like a real, you can draw on your own like lived experience or something for that. Whereas I've never been an elf before either, but I don't know. The fact that you have to pay, you get free points for having a character that's interesting seems like kind of weird to me. That's ultimately what feels like strange about these things. Is that you get points for that stuff. You gain 8 points if your character is prejudiced. But again, thank you, game. Use this quality carefully. Everyone should be on board with it being used and should never be used as a veiled excuse to state real-world prejudices or verbally attack, either directly or indirectly, other players. They know it. They acknowledge that it's dangerous. This is like, be very careful with it if you're going to use it. It's in the game, but like essentially get permission from your group to make a character that is like that. Yeah. And I think that's fine. Like, I think giving people tools to handle difficult stuff in a game can be useful and can be a way to get around that. Yeah. Like I don't think I would ever play in a group that used that really aggressively or use it for those purposes. But yeah, it does seem like that, right? Like you get points for making your character more complicated. And then I guess these are the archetypes. So if you just literally just want to grab a character, if you just want to print a page and jump into the game, you could be an adept, a karate wizard. You could be a combat mage. You could be a covert ops specialist. This cool guy with a knife. You could be a decker. He's cool. Satyr-line. You could be a face. I don't really know why this guy is the face. I guess because he's smiling. You could be a rigger, which I guess means you surf, you drone surf. A street samurai. A street shaman. Technomancer. A weapons specialist. So those, I feel like if you jumped in, these feel to me like they're from like the beginner's box, which is like, here, you can play one of these characters if you want to like get started playing the game.